But this is true in more areas than you think, and I want to give you an often overlooked example with crime and crime prevention. You see, it's large and in part the presence of citizens that prevents crime. For the most part, police punish crime and very rarely can stop crime after it started, but it's regular everyday people and their presence on the streets that's preventing crime. I want to illustrate this by talking about how a playground might be more dangerous than a nightclub, specifically if you went to a playground at night. The safety of a playground is the presence of other engaged citizens who are there at the right time. And at night, parks and playgrounds can become dangerous because the law-abiding citizens have left. And it's this concept that Jane Jacobs calls eyes on the street. Safe streets, in the context of the public realm where people belong, are going to be those that are active for the most times a day. When modernist city planners and architects looked at the city, they saw it as a form of chaos that needed to be organized. And one way they organized this was something called Euclidean or exclusionary zoning. This meant they separated the city for the different types of land uses, but this also meant that a business park, which is busy from 9 to 5, mostly dead from 5 to 9. Spaces that have a very dead time on their timeline need to be artificially policed. So Jane Jacobs looked at this sort of chaos that the modern architects saw, actually saw it as a sort of complex organization, something she referred to as the ballet of the streets. You see, when people are getting off work and leaving their businesses, if there are residents nearby, they're getting home, almost like two guard shifts changing over. If there's local businesses nearby that make sense for the person to leave their house and walk there, the journey to the business is almost like a guard going on around. There are literally tests that architects and city planners can do to see how engaged a space actually is. Different things that they could be looking out for. Things like the use test, which is what I was just talking about. If you have homes mixed with businesses that bring people out into the streets like cafes, and businesses that have later shifts so people are there at different late times of day, that's going to mix the time in which the streets are busy. And have things like an age test. Are there things that will bring and engage and make different demographics feel safe to be there? That is to say, if it's safe and appealing for young kids and older people, those are the people who are usually free midday. Young kids with stay-at-home parents, older people because they're retired. So that can keep the streets busy with eyes during that time of day. You could also have the native visitor test. Do you have reasons for people who live here to stay around and stay connected? Because with an informed baseline of what their community is like, they're going to be most likely the person to sniff out if something is weird. And one of my favorites, the path and destination test. Think of your community made up of different nodes or places to go. If there are safe pathways to get there and interesting pathways to get there on foot and by bike, you're essentially creating sentinels as people walk from place to place. Sit and stand test, making it a comfortable places for people to come and stay a while. You're essentially encouraging people to take a guard shift for a longer period of time and making it a place worth sticking around. And then the last two, the sunshade test, are you making it comfortable for different types of day? And the nosy neighbor test. Now the nosy neighbor test is probably what we were all thinking when I started this video. That one retiree that has too much time that's always complaining on Nextdoor about one thing or another that turns out to be just their prejudice. But one of the reasons the nosy neighbors are overly involved today is that there's nothing to do in a neighborhood except for that. What I mean, it's good to some extent that we know our neighbors and we can see when something's off and we can step in to try and help. The reason we have such extreme examples of people being unhelpful is because that old person has nothing else to do in their community. It's dangerous to the public if they were to drive. It's dangerous to themselves if they were going to walk anywhere. Plus, there's nothing nearby worth walking to. So they become overly involved in a residential neighborhood. So next time there's a local zoning hearing and someone's trying to convert a house into a coffee shop or put in a neighborhood restaurant, there's lots of reasons for why this is a good thing. If you were to just show up and talk about this one point, it might open people's eyes up to the concept that mixed-use development and eyes on the street increase safety in your neighborhood.